These are mine now.
Hey!
Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Kyoto Bolt fam, it's the director. Chargers fans, we got a pretty big video today, man. Big video, lots of preparation, tons of Photoshop in preparation for this one. We're going to be talking about the 2024 schedule and why it might lead to a pretty shocking end result for the Chargers in 2024. I know a lot of us going in with tempered expectations. We're all hyped. I'm hyped about Jim Harbaugh. We went over my biggest reasons I'm hyped about the season in my last video. Jim Harbaugh was among those, and it gives me a lot of optimism for the season. But I think even with that, we all kind of understand it takes time to build what he's trying to envision. It takes time to get the team together and the talent together. But when looking into the hype stuff that I was excited for this season, I could not help but notice that the schedule was very much so in our favor. So much so that you take a look at it in terms of contrast of last season, it's night and day. Last season, brutal schedule, leading to one of the more horrific Chargers seasons we've seen in a long time, which ultimately landed us a Jim Harbaugh. Huge turnaround for the organization. But this season, even with a slight retooling of the team and of the culture, I think the schedule just might give us that boost to stay as very legitimate contenders this year. Dare I say, give us a solid shot at the playoffs. Then who knows what happens when a Harbaugh makes it to the postseason. I think a lot of that is very exciting to think about. So today we're going to be going over my win-loss prediction for the 2024 season. Lots of preparation for this one. So, I mean, buckle up, have a lot of fun, put your feet up, and let's enjoy some Director Chargers football. Before we do kick things off, shout out to the sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $250. Newcomers, take advantage of the special on screen. Before we do kick off, hit us up with a like and sub. If you do enjoy this Chargers content, the small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. New road to 100K, baby. Let's get it. Lights, camera, action. My early Chargers 2024 win-loss prediction video. All right. We kind of went over this pretty lightly when the schedule came out. Now I've had time to take a look at the opponent rosters, take a look at the strength of our season in terms of our opponents, and honestly, I think a lot of us are going to be a bit shocked. You guys want to know something cool? I don't know if anybody has noticed this particular photo out onto the web, onto the universe. I've seen it everywhere. I mean, if I'm being honest, I'm going to pat myself on the back a little bit for getting this out so soon, because I saw it with like ESPN and NFL Network and a bunch of places, online using it. This was actually something I photoshopped back in the day. You guys will see some of the details and stuff on there. Kind of cool to see. I wanted to use that for the prediction video template today. Ooh, dude, I don't know, man. I don't know. The more I take a look at the team, the more I take a look at Jim Harbaugh, the more I'm watching, like I mentioned, like Ted Lasso and All or Nothing, all that kind of stuff, getting into the mind of our coach, the more I get excited for the season. And like I mentioned at the top of the video, it's a retooling kind of experience right now. A lot of us, my expectations personally are tempered, right? We're going to, even if we go 8-8, like I'd be super happy because I know something's being built. But the whole reason I decided to put this video together a little bit sooner than I normally do, because this is something I normally launch in like, July, and I'm getting closer to training camp, is because I've had time to take a look at our situation and understand that the strength of schedule that the Chargers have right now, being ranked one of the easiest schedules in the NFL in 2024, might just give us a little bit of an edge to shock the NFL with the Jim Harbaugh hire, as well as what we can do maybe if we do get into the postseason. So we're going to go through game by game and give you guys my overarching thoughts on the opponent and their roster and how the Chargers are going to be able to face them and tackle each individual week and hopefully give ourselves a shot at the postseason. So the Chargers-Raiders home opener kickoff for the Bolts. This is a really good one to come back into, man, because quite honestly, I know you guys have been there. I've been there too. My best friend's a Raiders fan, okay? It's been a long off season, okay? And I've been giving it to him. Whatever, dudes. Like, go ahead. Talk your crap, man. They dropped a 60 burger on us. They buried us into the ground. From their perspective, it was It was an execution, okay, and it was tough to stomach as a Chargers fan. It was probably one of the toughest losses I've ever witnessed as a Chargers fan. However, it did somewhat help usher in the biggest change I've seen as a Chargers fan so far, and ultimately it could lead to the Raiders' demise. Now, that aside, because that game definitely not one I want to bring up too often, but it's a big one because we have some unfinished business with the Raiders via last season. It really felt like the Chargers kind of knew they were done. The team had been falling apart. The leadership had been lacking, and more or less, it was a white flag waved by the Chargers. Was it the last week of the season last year? It was just absolute chaos. Now the Chargers come back rejuvenated with new life, with Jim Harbaugh, new appreciation for maybe life and football in general, and facing up against a team that ultimately they need to take care of business. I think this is an exciting home opener. I think Chargers fans are going to be eager to see how this one goes down. And I think Jim Harbaugh understands the significance of not just this rivalry, but this particular game following the biggest beatdown in Chargers history, I think, and one of the biggest wins in Raiders history. We need to come out here and let the Raiders know that the team that they've put together, be it good in spots, isn't going to be enough to take on the Jim Harbaugh-led Chargers. Now, to give the Raiders a little bit of credit here, to the left, you guys will see some players that I've highlighted from each team. Christian Wilkins, fantastic ad for them. They also got Brock Bowers in there. They're going to be leaning on Aiden O'Connell, though. That's the biggest problem you're going to find with the Raiders. They got some good pieces on the roster. Adams, Max Crosby, of course, is going to be one. Big test for Joe Alt in week one. But ultimately, the Aiden O'Connell slash it's not Jimmy Garoppolo anymore. It's Gardner Minshew quarterback situation is going to make it pretty difficult for them throughout the year. And the Chargers, the way that they're being tailored, the way that they're being built in this particular season is going to make it very difficult for the Raiders to do anything close to what they did last time, even if it was with Aiden O'Connell. So at the bottom of every screen, you're going to see my prediction for that particular game. I got the Chargers winning this one pretty handedly, actually. A really nice testament to what they've been building with their run game, what their defense is all about, only allowing, let's say, 2 field goals or a touchdown without a PAT. I think that's a really good way to label yourself as a team in 2024, what you're all about on defense and what you're all about on offense. Sure, you don't have to go out there and blow them up for like 30 points, but you're going to control that game. And Jim Harbaugh is going to show us how to close out these games with the lead too. So I don't know, man. I think it's going to be an important game. I think it's going to be a fun game. And ultimately, I think it's one that's going to help Chargers fans feel a lot better about how the season ended last year. All right, let's move into week 2. The Chargers will head to Carolina to face the Panthers, which, I mean, we're going to have to move some stuff around on the fly, aren't we? The Panthers, sneakily, not a terrible, terrible team. They've had some growth over the past year or two. They're going to have to continue working at it. As the roster has a ton of vacancies, all over the team that need addressing. It's going to be a franchise that's going to take some time to gel. I think that over the next 2 or 3 years, they're going to be a pretty good team. I can't quite say if they'll be. A lot of it depends on Bryce Young. Right now, I'm a Bryce Young believer. I think he's going to turn out to be just fine. But in his second season, are we going to see the kind of leap that it takes to really turn heads in the league? Maybe. As for this particular game, though, I think the Chargers are going to have an easier time. Let's just say this. If the Chargers were facing the Panthers, let's say week 14, week 15, I might have a little bit of different of an opinion on this, but I feel like as the season goes on, the Panthers will start to figure it out. They'll start to become a better team. But this early, week 2, they got a lot of things that they got to figure out. They got a lot of young pieces coming in. They got a lot of figuring out to do with Bryce Young still. Jonathan Brooks, who I've labeled as one of the best players on their team, might not be 100% at that point. I think week 2 Panthers definitely a lot less scary than like a week 15 Panthers, and for that reason, I got the Chargers taking this one 24-13. And again, you're going to see kind of a trend with a lot of these scores. The Chargers don't need to be putting up monster points. You know what I mean? Every once in a while they might, but I think, honestly, it's about control. Keep yourself ahead of the opponent and try and milk that clock. Keep control of the game clock as much as possible. Okay, but yeah, Bryce Young, Derek Brown, one of the better defensive tackles in the league, and Jonathan Brooks, if healthy, are going to be guys you have to keep an eye out for. Week 3, the Chargers will travel to Pittsburgh. I got to watch this game a couple of years ago. Fantastic game. Bit of a similar roster, I'm not going to lie. Hasn't changed too much outside of quarterback, which is a pretty significant move there. But back then, I watched it with Big Ben and that roster of Steelers, which turned out to be one of the best games of that season. This year, things look more or less the same. A couple of additions. Of course, at quarterback, you got Justin Fields and likely the starter, Russell Wilson. And then you got this big add at the bottom, which I think is being overlooked by a lot of people, in Patrick Queen. Patrick Queen, I think, is going to help that defense really solidify. And it's going to be a very difficult team to overcome defensively. The offense, a lot is still to be determined. I think a lot of it's going to run through Najee Harris. George Pickens, though, I did point out as one of the more dangerous players because I do think he can pop off for a couple of big plays or two. But ultimately, the biggest test for this defense, or I should say for this offense, and the biggest test for this team is going to be TJ Watt. I'm a big TJ Watt fan. I can't even say believer because he's gone out and proven it over and over and over again. He's been a defensive player of the year snub a couple of times at least. And I got to tell you, this dude, he strikes fear in my heart. He is one of the best. And now that Aaron Donald's gone, I'm going to say it. TJ Watt's the best defensive player in the NFL. And again, it's going to be a very tough matchup for our guy Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater on those ends. But even with that being said, this is also a team in a very similar situation as the previous. They have a lot of figuring out to do. I'm going to repeat myself. If this was a Week 11, Week 12 Steelers matchup, I'm a little more worried. But at this point, they're coming out super fresh with the new quarterback. Who knows what version of Russell Wilson that we're going to see? Who knows what version of the offense that we're going to see? That quarterback position is going to determine a lot of their success. And this early, I don't know if they've had enough time to kind of figure it out. So I have the Chargers winning this one narrowly. I think off largely the back of their defense, the Chargers are going to have to find a way to overcome what I'm going to say are the sneaky Steelers at this point. 27-24 doesn't let the game get away from them, and ultimately it does prove that the Chargers can knife their way through a very good defense in the league. 'Cause I consider the Steelers a very good defense in the NFL, and if we can pop off for over 20 points, heck, 27 points, I think it shows that we have the potential to score when necessary, but we don't yet necessarily use it as the tip of our spear all the time. The tip of our spear, I think, is more of control. Control the clock, control the ground game, control your opponent when you can. 27-24, a narrow victory, but one that shows us that, hey, we can figure it out if an opponent throws a curveball like that at us, okay? Week 4, the Chargers. I'm pretty sure this one is being played at home versus the Kansas City Chiefs. This is a really tough one, dudes. The Chiefs, they're going to be the ultimate test for Jim Harbaugh and his assertion into the AFC West. Of course, everyone's going to be looking at the Chargers and Broncos and Raiders. Who's going to be the team to dethrone the reigning Super Bowl champions? Is it time yet? Is there anybody predicting the fall of the Chiefs yet? I don't know, man. It feels like it's a little bit early. And the Chargers, who are, still retooling, are going to have to keep that at the front of their minds as they continue to build this team. If we're going to succeed and if we're going to grow into the potential of team that we're hoping to be, we have to find a way to take down the Chiefs. Like, we have to almost build our team around taking down the Chiefs at least once or twice a season, because they're going to be there. And they're going to ultimately be the final boss at the end of the season a lot of the times. Even if you make it into the postseason, they're likely going to be a team that you have to get through in order to have a shot at the Super Bowl. And right now, they haven't shown any signs of slowing down. Now, Jim Harbaugh, I think he's more than capable of finding a way. I think he's as smart as any guy to come in and find that weakness of the Browns or of the Chiefs. Heck, maybe he's ready and comes out the gate and completely shocks everybody in their first matchup in Week 4. I just don't know if it's going to be that time yet. I got the Chargers losing this one, 24-34. Kind of a reminder that we still have work to do. Chargers fans going in optimistic. I certainly feel like it's possible, but ultimately, it reminds us that we have to be a little bit more patient, and that Jim Harbaugh and the guys, they're working on it. They're figuring it out. And over time, guys like Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Chris Jones, they're human. And Jim Harbaugh will find a way around them, okay? With that, the Chargers will move into week 5, which is ultimately going to be their bye week. Not the biggest fan, dude. Not the biggest fan of the week 5 bye. We're going to go ahead and roll with it and hope that the Chargers find some momentum regardless. Week 6, they're going to come back and face a division rival in the Denver Broncos. Now, the Broncos could be a sneaky team this year. I'm not going to go ahead and say, they're going to be, a sleeper or anything like that, but a lot of it does sort of fall on the shoulders of this retooling that they're doing behind Bo Nix. There's a lot going on if you're a Broncos fan, right? I think Sean Payton was the right move. I think ultimately, like we're talking with Jim Harbaugh and these legacy coaches, over time, he's going to figure that team out and he's going to get them back on their feet. Right now, though, going into a couple of seasons, it still feels a little bit soon, especially because of how far back the Russell Wilson thing put them. That's a lot of money. And it's, again, trying to figure out quarterback and who you are. They almost got rid of some big players, including Pat Surtain on that screen. It's a lot to figure out if you're a Broncos fan. However, I think they are on the up and up. And I do think they're a team that the Chargers need to keep an eye on going forward. But like it says at the bottom of the screen, I got them winning this one 20-10. I think Bo Nix is going to have a pretty difficult time handling a Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Tuli Tuipulotu, and Bud Dupree in this matchup. There's some teams that just won't be ready for the pressure. I should have mentioned it versus the Raiders. That's going to be a massacre. The Broncos, certainly not the best line in the league. That's going to be a big weakness of them. And then Bo Nix, being the new kid on the block, might not be as prepared to face something like that right away in week 6 of the NFL in 2024. So I got the Chargers starting off 4-1 in their first 5 games. I think that's pretty solid, man. And again, it kind of reflects the strength of schedule for the Chargers, because I don't think we're stretching the imagination too much so far, right? Taking down the Raiders and the Panthers and narrowly the Steelers. That could go either way. And then losing to the Chiefs and then coming back and beating the Broncos. So far, everything feels pretty chill, right? We're going to stretch the imagination just a little bit here in a second, but so far, everything feels pretty practical. All right, so the 4-1 Chargers, who just took down Pat Surtain, Javonte Williams, and Bo Nix, are going to now travel to Arizona to take on the Cardinals, who, let's be honest, guys, of the teams that I feel are on the upright, like the potential to improve from last season, the potential to become the next big thing, I think the Cardinals are kind of one of my favorites right now. They had a heck of a draft. Marvin Harrison Jr., who you're going to see on there. I put Trey Benson on there just as a reminder that that's where he landed. You got Kyler Murray, who definitely I think is underrated. I think a lot of people kind of wrote him off. I still think Kyler Murray, with the right pieces, beat a better offensive line, which they still need to work on, is a very good quarterback. I think this is sneakily one of the better teams in the NFL, and I think it's going to reflect in this game. I think we're going to ultimately see it, pop up sooner than later. Is it enough to take down the Chargers? I don't know. I think it could be close, but this is going to be one of my favorite teams to watch in 2024. I mean, yeah, I'm a Chargers fan, but I'm also a football fan, and I recognize when something's happening. I'm sure there's a lot of players or a lot of fans right now thinking the same about the Chargers. Something's happening, right? We're turning a corner. We finally got the coaching right, and we don't just have this monster roster. Now we got the right guy captaining the ship. I see something with the Cardinals, and I know something's happening. Again, it might be a little early for us to say, hey, look at this new playoff potential squad, which is the case for a lot of teams on this list right now. But they're turning into something. Trey Benson, that's a franchise running back. Marvin Harrison Jr., of course, one of the next best things at wide receiver. Kyler Murray could be elevated by these dudes. It's going to be a fun game, and ultimately it's one that I may travel to go see in person. I've been wanting to see the Cardinals. I've been a Cardinals light fan. They're kind of my NFC team. I've been a big Larry Fitzgerald fan for a long time, and of course I'm excited to see how Marvin Harrison challenges that for one of their best wide receivers in that franchise. But it's going to be a fun game to watch. But I still have the Chargers taking them down in this one. Chargers 30 to the Cardinals 21. I do think the Cardinals defense has some pieces, but I do think the Chargers offense is very well prepared and specifically tailored to take down a defense like theirs. And the Chargers, again, are going to have to find some momentum at some point. Coming off their last game versus Denver, I think is going to help that momentum. And ultimately, when you find that kind of control, you're going to stay ahead of your opponent. And that's why I have them putting up 30 points because, yes, maybe the defense doesn't keep up quite as much this week with Trey Benson and Marvin Harrison, maybe even Kyler Murray running all over the field. But I think the Chargers will do a good job at staying in control. And that's why I think time to put up more points, right? Maybe we don't need it every week, but 30 points this week feels like it's appropriate. So Kyler Murray and the Cardinals, I think it's going to be a very fun game. It could go either way, but right now I got the Chargers taking them down there. In week 8, I got the Chargers versus the New Orleans Saints, a team that I think, again, like the Cardinals, we'll say has some sneaky potential, okay? I'm not going to go ahead and say, like them, the next playoff team, but there's a game every year that maybe you feel, oh, the Chargers should have had it, or oh, the Chargers dropped this one. For whatever reason, and it's since the schedule dropped and since the opponents dropped that I've kind of felt this way. I feel like the Chargers, if they're going to drop a game, it feels like the Saints could be it, right? Maybe the Saints aren't the most intimidating team out there. Maybe they're not the most catered to the playoffs or whatever, but I feel like if the Chargers have that weird game in the season, for whatever reason, the Saints are kind of getting my attention there. Now, the Saints aren't a bad team. Alvin Kamara, he's still shown that he's got plenty of juice. Cam Jordan and the defense looks as good as ever. Marshawn Lattimore, they still got Honey Badger back there. I would say this is more so a tough defensive team with some potential on offense. I love Chris Olave. They got Taysom Hill out there for whatever it's worth, and I think Derek Carr is still a pretty serviceable quarterback. So for that being said, we're not going to struggle versus a terrible team, but it's a team that I think we're 100% capable of taking down, that we should take down. But every once in a while, you see the Chargers find themselves dropping a game that they shouldn't. I'm gonna feel like it's this one this season. Chargers 16. Saints 21, and who knows, maybe the new Jim Harbaugh regime doesn't allow that to happen. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and include that in my predictions, okay? Next up, week 9, Chargers take on the Cleveland Browns. This again, I wish this was a home game, okay? Because I would love to see this one in person. I really would. Myles Garrett, Nick Chubb, Denzel Ward. You got two unstoppable forces going up against immovable objects. Like, it feels like a very fun, old school style of football game that you're going to see a lot of defense, a lot of toughness. It's exciting to think of what Jim Harbaugh and the Browns are going to look like head to head. And ultimately, it's going to come down to some of the star-studded players, right? Myles Garrett, he's a stud, one of the best in the NFL, if not the best in the NFL. You got Nick Chubb out here, who, if he's healthy, and I think by week 9 he should definitely be at full speed, is one of the best running backs to carry an offense like that. And then Denzel Ward just kind of represents some of the awesome talent they have back there, including, Del Pitt and Emerson. Like, it's a really, really good unit the Browns have put together the last couple of seasons. And ultimately, the NFC North, or the AFC North, feels a lot like what Jim Harbaugh is trying to create. The Baltimore Ravens, the Cleveland Browns. It feels like this is a good sample of what the Chargers are trying to become in the future. And ultimately, I think it's going to result in one of those classic games that doesn't have a lot of scoring, but really has a lot of moments. I do have the Chargers losing this one 10-14, putting us at a record of 5-3. But again, a lot of toughness out here, and it's a good Browns team. Again, this ain't your daddy's Browns. This is a very good Browns team, and ultimately, it does, like a lot of the losses I've explained so far, it does explain that we have more time or more work to do, and we need more time to make it happen. But I think that's putting up a pretty good fight, and I think ultimately it's going to be a fun game to watch despite the result. But hey, it's a close one there. We have a lot of these games losing by one or less, or excuse me, by 7 or less points. And the Chargers here at 5-3 certainly could be in a much worse spot to start the year. Let's move into to week 10. The Chargers taking on the Tennessee Titans again, right? We faced him last season. Now it's time for Jim Harbaugh to get a crack. And this Titans team looks way, way different. This team has had the identity of Derrick Henry for a long time. Those days are gone. What is this team going to look like now without that? Tony Pollard was brought in to be the primary running back of that squad. I don't know if that's going to work out, if I'm being honest. Let's just talk about it from a fantasy football perspective. I don't know if I'm drafting Tony Pollard, even though that offense is probably still going to go through him. I don't know how efficient he's going to be versus what Derrick Henry's been providing, and I don't know how similar they are in terms of running style either. Instead, I think I'm putting more faith in Will Levis. I'm a Will Levis believer. I think he's got a lot of potential. I think he's flashed a lot in the last season. But DeAndre Hopkins, they also brought in Calvin Ridley, if I remember correctly. They got some weapons out there that they can maybe turn to the pass a little bit more. And Tony Pollard has a lot of upside as a passing down running back as well. So there's some potential there. On defense, they did pick up L'Jarius Sneed, but ultimately there's not a ton of talent out there. Okay, and I got the Chargers kind of taking advantage of that situation in Tennessee or versus Tennessee. 31-21 is going to be my score, and it's going to be one of those there, again, you're looking for momentum. And I think this is a really good statement game saying, hey, dude, the defense ain't putting up much of a fight. Maybe the offense had a little bit more in them than we expected. I did put 21 points up for Tennessee because I mainly have DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley. I think those guys are going to challenge our cornerbacks, which right now are kind of up in the air. But the Chargers, I do think, are very capable of putting up points. And there's a couple of games this season that I think they're going to flex that. And I'm going to put the Titans as one of those teams that we do flex on a little bit. All right. Week 11, the Chargers take on the Cincinnati Bengals at home. Oh, I'm not going to lie, dudes. This is one of those games I'm considering going to as well. And the people are thinking I'm crazy because they're like, Director, don't you want to watch a game that you're like pretty guaranteed to win? I'm like, no, there's two or three games that really have my attention because they're going to be really, really good games, right? And this is going to be one of them. Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. I'm pretty sure we beat the Cincinnati Bengals the last time we played them. And I think it was the year that the Bengals went to the Super Bowl, right? Now you see your rematch here, and it's going to be fun because the fundamentals of both of these teams are kind of opposite, right? You got Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, the high-flying offense of the Chiefs, which has been awesome, or excuse me, of the Bengals. It's been awesome the past several seasons. They don't have Joe Mixon anymore. Who do they bring in at running back? I forget. But it's a different-looking offense because of that a little bit. Other than that, though, the high-flying part, Jamar Chase, Higgins, those guys, it looks awesome. And again, I hate to say it, but as a fan of football, Joe Burrow is like one of my favorite quarterbacks in the league, not named Justin Herbert. Him, Lamar Jackson, of course, some of the default best in the league right now. It makes me excited to see how the Chargers are going to tackle an opponent like this. Because Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, that's enough to get you a little antsy all of a sudden. But sneakily, the Bengals are building a defense as well, led by their star pass rusher and Trey Hendrickson. I think this guy had like 17 and a half sacks last season, if I remember correctly. He's sneakily going to be a problem for a lot of teams. Will it be so much for the Chargers because of how good of our offensive line is? I don't know. But that defense does have some pieces on it all of a sudden. Can the Chargers find a formula to take down Joe Burrow and the Bengals, though? I'm going to say it was very close. I got the Chargers narrowly losing this one, 24-28. Mainly that Bengals offense, very tough for us to contain, and ultimately one of the biggest tests this season for our corner and secondary group that is in the works right now. We don't really know how they're going to solidify themselves. 24-28, again, very close game, putting us at 6-4, but should be a very, very fun game nonetheless. Let's go ahead and move into Week 12. Now, of all the games this season, this is the one that I've got circled, bolded, underlined, etc., etc. If I could go to a game, I'm hoping I can go to this game. It's going to be Week 12, Chargers versus the Baltimore Ravens. Okay, the Harbaugh Bowl. The first Harbaugh Bowl in many a moon, and one of the most significant games for the Chargers this season for several reasons, okay? The Baltimore Ravens have been atop the AFC for a while now, okay? They are a very, very dangerous playoff caliber team, and it's just a coincidence at this point, right, that they're led by Jim Harbaugh's brother, John Harbaugh. It's going to be a very, very difficult game, I know, for them because they've talked a lot about not wanting to face each other, but it's a very important game to kind of figure out what they want to be, where they are, and how they can get through each other. Because there's going to be a point, I almost promise you this, that the Chargers are going to be that team that John Harbaugh and the Ravens have circled as a tough one to get through at some point. Maybe it's not this season, but it will be a season in the future because it is kind of like looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, how do we take you down? It's a very similar system that the Chargers are running. So much so that we've been labeled Ravens West by a lot of people because of how much we're taking inspiration from the Baltimore Ravens and their systems, both on offense and defense. Now, ultimately, there are some different aspects to both teams. The Chargers certainly are as dangerous in terms of their mobility at quarterback, but they do have a little bit more strengths in other places. I would say offensive line is sneakily a little bit better than the Ravens, which the Ravens already have a pretty dang good line. The Chargers are sneakily climbing as one of the best lines in the league right now. There are some things that they have to still work on to get close to what the Ravens are operating. The Ravens have a very good defense. They have a lot more pieces than we do in some areas. I think the Chargers have the edge at the edge position, but there are some bigger aspects on the team that are going to need some help if you're trying to mirror that concept out there. On offense, so the biggest thing that's going to be tough for us to contain is Mark Andrews, the tight end, and Derrick Henry, the running back. This is Jim Harbaugh's dream combo if he were to be, plucking players out of the air to create an offense. Mark Andrews is the perfect kind of tight end. Derrick Henry, the perfect kind of running back. Unfortunately, the Chargers aren't battle-tested yet enough for me to tell you that we can take them down, right? Mark Andrews and Derrick Henry, those are two very, very tall orders to contain at this point, and it's going to be dangerous. It's going to be dangerous for everybody in the NFL that's facing the Ravens this year. I think they're going to be a force, and I think I'm not the first person to tell you that. And unfortunately, I do have the Chargers dropping this one a lot closer than some people are saying. A lot of people are saying that we're going to get blown out of the water 34-16 or whatever. I got it by one score, by one field goal, 21-24, and one that shows us the Chargers are closer than a lot of us give us credit for. But 6-5 again, we're starting to slip a little, but it should be one of the funnest games of the season to see. I'm very excited to see both Harbaughs on each sideline duking it out. Week 13, Chargers are going to bounce back here, hopefully, and go face the Atlanta Falcons. Now, the Falcons, they have a lot of offense. They have some of my favorite players of the last decade coming through the draft on their offense. Bijan Robinson. My wife, she's in a work league where it's an auction league, right? So you get this little budget and you can auction on players. I told her, I don't care what it costs. Get Bijan Robinson. And she ended up paying, I think, over $100. You have a budget of $200. She ended up paying over $100 for Bijan. And I told her, listen, because it's a keeper league, I was like, it may not pay off this year because you have to continue to build your roster in future seasons, but Bijan's going to be such a solid cornerstone for you for a long time. And that's because of how much I believe in his skill set. And I don't even know how much he was utilized last year. It was because of the quarterback play. What was going on with Bijan? Why wasn't he seeing more reps? Was there an injury involved, I think, at some point? Either way, Bijan is the heart and soul of that offense. And I think he's going to feast this season with Kirk Cousins coming in at quarterback. Finally, the Atlanta Falcons have a competent quarterback to run this engine, dude. Kyle Pitts has a lot of potential all of a sudden. Of course, Bijan out here. Drake London should be a fantastic fantasy ad. This is this fantasy football, you're slobbering all over the roster trying to get a piece of it because of how much potential all of a sudden has been unlocked with the quarterback ad. Not just that, but they went out and got Michael Penix as well. So this team, over the next decade, if that works out, if the quarterback position is in fact solved for the Falcons, should be that fantasy team that everyone's looking for, because I think they're going to unlock a lot of potential there. But I will say this, as much potential as I see in the Falcons, they still have an Achilles heel, and that's that defense. That defense, which has, again, some pieces, has a whole lot of holes. And yes, they've been addressing, I think the biggest thing they've needed to address is their pass rush, which has a little bit of help now. I don't know if it's quite there yet. It's going to be a very fun team to watch, though. You're going to see a lot of catch-up football from the Falcons. You're going to see a lot of points need to be scored. But ultimately, you're going to see games like this a lot from the Falcons, where it just gets away from them. This is going to be one of my favorite games to watch of the season because I think the Falcons are going to put up points. I think they're too dangerous not to put up points. And I think 25 may be a little bit low. I think they could be as much as 31, 33 points. But I think this is the highest scoring game of the season for the Chargers. That defense for the Falcons, not great. Jim Harbaugh knows this. I think we're going to pass a lot more. I think the Chargers have opportunities there to set up very solid, play action opportunities and just letting Justin Herbert go out there and sling it. By this time, you have Vlad McConkey and the guys, kind of in tune. This is probably going to be one of my favorite games to watch. And ultimately, again, one of those games I wish wasn't being played away. I would consider going to this one if I were a Chargers fan in Georgia. Chargers 38, Falcons 25, record of 7-5 all of a sudden. All right. This next game, pretty important. Okay, the Chargers, week 14, a bulk of the season behind us. We're starting to understand what Jim Harbaugh is, what the Chargers are, what they've turned into as a squad, what their potential is on solidifying this new culture, this new build. Now it's time to face the Kansas City Chiefs again. And by this point, the Chargers, who have already faced them early in the season at week 4, we understand that the Chiefs are no slouches, that they're still going to be the ultimate test, as a rite of passage to even, challenge the AFC West. Jim Harbaugh has had some time to think about it by this point in week 14. Okay, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, I fully expect these guys to be firing on all cylinders. The Chiefs are still the Chiefs, but Jim Harbaugh is a smart guy. And he feels like one of those guys where it's like, fool me once, shame on you, fool me once, or fool me twice, shame on me. And I think he's going to be ready. I really do. And that's going to be one of the biggest aspects of this season that I'm looking forward to, and I think is absolutely possible. And this is a very, very tall order in Week 14. Can the Chargers go into Arrowhead and take down the Kansas City Chiefs? I think behind Jim Harbaugh, anything is possible. I'm going to show you guys this a little bit early here. Chargers 31, Chiefs 30. I think a narrow victory here really represents what this hire has in store for us in the future of this team. Some people are going to scoff at this. I'm sure there's going to be a Chief fan or two in here being like, ha, look at this crazy Chargers fan. Watch out, Kansas City. Don't get a big head. Don't keep a big head too long either, because this Jim Harbaugh hiring, it should scare you. It should frighten you, because it may not be this season. Heck, it may not even be next season. But soon enough, this is the kind of hire that takes down dynasties. This is the kind of hire that shifts power in a division. And this is the kind of hire that could make you stumble, even in his first season. Jim Harbaugh is special. And I think, yes, it's a tall order to go out and beat the Chiefs even one time in the season, especially in their home turf. That's why I got the Chargers losing the first, matchup, even though it's at home for the Chargers, because it's a bit early. You need a little bit more time, right? And then the Chiefs are going to look a little different this season too. But Jim Harbaugh is a smart guy, and I think a victory on the road versus the Super Bowl champions is as big of a sign, as big of a signal to the NFL that watch out for the Chargers. This Jim Harbaugh thing, it's for real. And I think you're going to see a game like that this year. Ultimately, I honestly almost made it the Ravens game because I thought that, hey, he's going up against John. It should be a fun one. I think he has a shot at taking him down. He understands him better than anybody. He'll be ready to face up against John Harbaugh. But ultimately, I think the Chiefs are more important to take down at least once this year. And this is not something that I had gone into my predictions anticipating doing. I honestly had anticipated us, getting swept by the Chiefs, but taking down the rest of the AFC West. No, I think the Chargers are capable. And I think Jim Harbaugh is a smart guy, and I think he will find a way to take down the Chiefs in Week 14 after 10 full weeks of, mulling it over and figuring out what the Chiefs are in 2024 and what their weaknesses are that he can expose. So very important week, and one that, again, might be shocking, might be a stretch for some people, but hey, I think it's an important rite of passage for the Chargers in the AFC West to make that happen. I think Jim, as much as anybody in the NFL, can make that happen. All right? The following week, the Chargers will go home and face the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which this game, you guys, I can already see it in the comments. Some people are going to get pissed off by this. Like, how are you going to have the Chargers go out and beat the Kansas City Chiefs and then the following week take on the Buccaneers and put up an L against them, which I'm going to give you guys a score already, 21-25. All I'm going to say is that the Chargers' heavy focus on the Chiefs is going to pay off at some point, right? The Buccaneers are still a very solid football team. And again, it feels like one of those situations where how the Chargers are going to go out and beat the Chiefs and then lose to the Buccaneers. You see stuff like that with every franchise, right? You see stuff like that every year with like some of the biggest contending teams. I know the Eagles lost to a couple of good teams. I think the Bills lost to the Patriots once last year. It happens, okay? Even after having a significant game like a win over the Kansas City Chiefs. But it doesn't derail your season at all. I think the Chargers, again, this is going to be a tough one. Mike Evans, Vita Vea, Antoine Winfield Jr., very good talent all over that roster. I'm a big Baker Mayfield fan all of a sudden. I love his, rebirth into the NFL. They got a great run game. They got a great run defense. They got other weapons in the passing game as well. It's a solid team, and ultimately I think they're a contender right now. So I do have the Chargers stumbling a little bit after the Chiefs' victory. But after that, man, I think they're ready to rock and roll. Look at the rest of the schedule. One of the biggest reasons why I think that if the Chargers were to make the postseason, watch out, because there's going to be all sorts of momentum on this squad. The Chargers, once again, are going to be facing up against the Denver Broncos, which, let's be honest, the Chargers at this point, if they're locked and loaded, if they found a way to take down the Chiefs, I'm sure the other AFC West rivals are certainly, circled on their calendars too. I got the Chargers taking them down 27-17 pretty handedly. Maybe a little bit more points scored this time around. But the Chargers still maintaining control, I think, is going to be the biggest point of emphasis for me as in the AFC West for sure. Week 17, the Chargers take on the New England Patriots. And the Patriots, at this point, I think all of us can kind of expect what they are, right? This is a rebuilding Patriots by a wide margin. This team needs a lot of work, okay? Go ahead and put that right there so we can read Drake May just a little bit. Sorry, guys. I decided to put in the Jim Harbaugh thing last second, so I'm just kind of reevaluating everything as we go through. The Patriots very much so a rebuild. Drake May, I think, is going to be the starting quarterback by this time. I think they're starting the season with Jacoby Brissett. I think Drake May, I would bet like $100 that he's going to be the starting quarterback by week 17. And who knows what the team looks like by then. They could be sneaky. If Drake May turns out to be anything close to Justin Herbert, which was his NFL comp, then watch out because he'll have a big arm. But until then, Ramondre Stevenson, Christian Gonzalez. I think on offense they have Jalen Polk, right, at wide receiver. They need some work, and it's going to be a while before Mayo gets this team locked and loaded to be in any sort of position to take down a playoff contender like what I'm predicting the Chargers to be. So I got them losing this game 10-21. The Chargers will take another victory, putting us at a 10-6 record. A 10-6 record so far going into the last game of the season. As above, so below. The Chargers will finish off the season with the Raiders in Vegas this time around. And this is the ultimate counter, the ultimate revenge game, right? We already found some success versus them at home at SoFi Stadium. Now it's time to go to their home turf and avenge our Chargers players, fandom, even coaches of last season for the atrocities that we witnessed as a fan base last year. This is the time to go out there and say, this is a new Chargers team. This is the Jim Harbaugh Chargers. That 60 whatever score that you put up last season, this is the result of that action. We responded. We're here to avenge. We're here to defend pretty much our honor, remind you guys why you've been the bottom scum of the AFC West division for a long time. I got the Chargers stomping out the fires of the Vegas Raiders 28-3. Again, we don't need to put up 60. We just need to not just smush them, but when you rotate your foot on the bug a little bit just to make sure it's nice and squished and it ain't coming back, we need to rub them into the pavement just a little bit here, man. So I got the Chargers winning their final game of the season 28-3, which is ultimately going to result in a season that is very successful for the Chargers at 11-6. We are playoff bound. We are second in the AFC West. We're 6th seed in the NFL going into the postseason. I think this potential is real. Some people may push back on me on this. They may say, Director, there's absolutely no way. First season, we're going in with Jim Harbaugh on 11-6. Be honest, I've seen a lot of people predicting like a 7 or 8 win season, which ultimately I think is fine. It's a good expectation to go into, because it's a retooling season. It's a figuring out season. It's a transition season. But you also can't ignore how good of a schedule that we have this year. And what the potential really could be like because again, I don't know, outside of the Chiefs game, if we had any huge stretch of the imagination wins out here. Let's say you take 1 or 2 games away from the Chargers, that's still like a 9-8 season, right? A 10-7 season. And that to me is still kind of fringe good enough to get into the postseason. Watch out, man. All I'm going to say is watch out. I think Jim Harbaugh has as good a shot as anybody to make it to the postseason in his first year. He's proven to do that before. His first year with the Niners. I mean, look at that success. Watch out. Don't let him into the postseason if you're an AFC West rival. Don't do it. Because if he gets in, Jim Harbaugh has as good a shot as anybody to take down some of the best in the league. You don't want to be a team facing a Jim Harbaugh-led Chargers if you make it to the postseason. And I think the Chargers have a good shot of it this year because of the strength of schedule and because of, honestly, ultimately, the opportunities that they have in front of them because of their opponents and because of what Jim Harbaugh represents as a head coach and his success very early in his career everywhere else that he's been. Don't be shocked. Again, my expectations are a little lower. I would say conservatively, I have them at 10 wins. 10 or 9 wins is where I have them. But ultimately, when I go through the schedule and I take a look at some of the strengths that we have, some of the advantages that we have because of the roster of opponents that we're coming up against, I think 11-6 is definitely not too far of a stretch of the imagination. So you guys in the comment section, let me know what you think of that. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. If you like what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. We'll see you next time. Put your win-loss predictions in the comment section below. As always, bolt up and stay frosty. 11-6, man. Who's got it better than us? Nobody.